Hello, and thank you so much for joining Belkins Season 3 Under the Spotlight. Today, we have a head of sales and growth for Anchor. Traditional IT controls focus on locking down networks, devices, and people. All of this is done in the name of protecting data, but once those files are moved, shared, or stolen, the data is no longer protected, and even worse, these controls get in the way and frustrate business users to the point they intentionally work around them. Anchor inverts this equation by baking protection into the data, invisible to the business users, like antivirus, so that files are to free travel and security is out of the way. Simply put, wherever the data goes, it is protected. Founded in 2019, and joining me today is their head of sales and growth, Adam Bowen. Adam, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a mouthful, and I'm sure that some folks listening to this are like, okay, now what exactly does it do? I think on a high level, I get it, but would you mind simplifying in terms of helping people understand from a high level way what it is that you guys are actually doing?
Sure. Yeah, I think everybody understands today that data is the most valuable asset you have, right? And even so much so, like over the years, everybody's experienced heavy-handed security practices in one form or another, whether it's like DLP or other things. And that's all designed to try and keep the bad guys from getting in and the data from getting out. But it just completely falls down on, you mentioned it, once the files are moved, shared, or stolen, those things simply don't work anymore. And the other things are so heavy-handed that it just breaks the business workflow. And so you'll never win. The war of security versus business, security always loses, right? So from an Anchor perspective, we just said, why don't we just bake the protection directly into the data itself instead of the things around data, so that wherever the data goes, it's always protected. And we just focus on making that an invisible experience to the end user, so that way they're not trying to fight it. And so that's at the heart of what we do.
That's so interesting. So if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
A way that I would circumvent a security policy is that I have a template that I want to send, or I have a document that I want to send, but it requires the person I'm sending it to use their email address to activate it and to see it, or they have to use a certain code. So I'm going to download that document. I'm going to save it on my desktop. That way I can just attach it and send it out to anybody that I would like to. Is that kind of an example of protecting it?
Look, there's common examples. Man, that's a good one. It's common examples in the workplace. Your work machine doesn't let you work with certain tools and things that you like. So you send it to your Google Drive so you can work on from home or from your personal device, right? Or you're supposed to only work on certain things while you're in the office, but you really want to get home for your kids' t-ball game. So you send it to your grandma's house so you can work on it from there. Like that kind of stuff happens all the time. People aren't trying to be nefarious, right? They're just, the controls are getting in their way from getting their job done. So they try and work around them. And that kind of negligence ultimately is what leaves organizations open for attacks or breaches or data loss and thousands of dollars of fines, or as we see recently in the news, jail time, even for the CEOs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's big. Yeah. So those decisions create vulnerabilities for companies, which makes complete sense to me. With Anchor, I could do the same process. So the dad headed home for the t-ball game. He can send the document. The data is still going to be protected for him.
Absolutely. By default. So zero trust is a big buzzword right now out there, right? So I'm very loath to get on the buzzword hype, but effectively zero trust as a principle is great. Just like cloud as a principle is great and it's a structure. What the model we're employing is zero trust for file access. So no matter wherever that data goes, it's always protected. So you send it to your grandmother's house, it's protected. You won't be able to open it from there. That data itself, wherever you send it, once it's anchored, is always protected. And so it really flips the model on its head. If you think about today's security focuses on how do we know when to lock things down, right? How do we know when to shut down network traffic? How do we know when to lock down a device? How do we know when to disable a user? From an Anchor perspective, once you bake protection into data itself, it's really a matter of, it's always by default protected, always by default locked down. So in the case of sending the data to your grandmother's house, it's not, how does Anchor know to not let me use it from my grandmother's house? Anchor doesn't let you use it from anywhere that's not authorized. And so how does Anchor know how to allow me to use it? And that's because we combine it with multi-factor access controls that are constantly checking in the background. For example, Adam, while he's in the office, can use Microsoft Excel on his work computer to open the financial spreadsheets. As long as I'm doing my job, all that's continuously being checked in the background. I'm not being prompted for codes or any of that kind of annoyance stuff that we all hate today. Yeah. It's just working. But you invite me, Brian, out for coffee. I shut my lid. We go to the Starbucks. I open my laptop while we're there to check my email. And What happens? Anchor shuts down the spreadsheet. Why? Because one of the rules I gave you was that Adam, while he's in the office, can do all the things that we're doing. Anchor can't validate them in the office anymore. So it closes a document, gives me a warning that lets me know why I closed the document, and it's all centrally logged as well, right? So that's the principles of zero trust.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's impactful. So you're on the public Wi-Fi, you have vulnerabilities, Anchor knows, and it's like, nope, no thanks, we're good.
Yeah, effectively, unless you're passing the rules that have been defined for you, the answer is always no, right? And as long as you're passing the rules, then the answer will be yes. So it's a reverse kind of model. Now you're saying, well, what are the 5 ways or even 75 ways that I'd like for this data to be worked with? But you don't have to solve for all the infinity minus 75 ways you have to protect the data. So it's just a way of having secure data. And even all these things are technically, like, the technical superpower of what we have is really cool. Really, the thing that gets our customers most excited, things that get companies and our investors most excited, is the fact that this is as invisible to the end user as antivirus. So it doesn't change the way you work with your data. There's no weird workflows. There's no funky extensions. There's no funky right-click menus. An anchored spreadsheet, you double click it to open it, just like you do a normal spreadsheet today. There's nothing different. And so that really is the superpower of our solution.
Yeah, that is really powerful. Anybody, if you listen to any other episodes, you'll hear me talk about less clicks. I'm all about less clicks. When I talk about as technology evolves and innovates, I love seeing and reading about the different tools and the different softwares that are getting created. But when you think about implementation, it's like, from my perspective as VP of sales, is it going to allow us to have less clicks, or is it going to take us less time? So no, that makes sense to me. In terms of security, I can imagine that is your value proposition directly correlating to an improvement in the security of the business and the data, where it correlates back to a lower percentage of being breached or having a security incident?
Yeah, I think those are like CISO level metrics. The high level metrics that I'm seeing across the organization, it's like top line business things. So for example, like my target ICP, since we're having a sales call here, right, and talking about this methodology and the things we're doing here, is the top executives of companies. So I'm talking to CEOs, CFOs, CISOs, COOs, all kind of top level C-suite, as well as top level tech advisors, because the problem that I'm solving is unmet in all these organizations. And that is, how do I prevent the internal and external theft of my most sensitive data? So whether that's intellectual property, so think for manufacturing, CAD designs, blueprints, all that stuff, like how do I prevent that from being stolen? And it's not just it's obviously front and center today with all the cyber warfare and the global politics and things like that. But we also see the heat's turning up on these top level executives. We recently see in the news again, like CEOs are being held accountable. The FTC is like, nope, it's not just the CISO's job. It's your job. And it's coming for the boardroom too, right? That it's your job to protect customer data, financial data, intellectual property. We're seeing that across the board. And one of the big things is it's not like everybody's waking up and saying, I need to protect it. There was a big movement several years ago to try and protect it through technology called DLP, right? Yeah. But that's categorically, everybody's acknowledged that as it's failed because the technology couldn't stop things, but it was so heavy handed that in order for it to stop it, as I like to say, you had to turn it to 11 to stop your data from going out unauthorized. But that just broke the user experience. So either you completely get away with it or dialed it to 5. At that point, it's just security theater. It's not really stopping anything. And if you're losing 15% of your intellectual property, like that's still a pretty big deal. These are things that people cared about for a bit, but there hadn't been an evolution in data protection for a while that would cause them to revisit this whole problem over again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those digital assets are super, super important to have aligned to the right people that need to see them within an organization, as well as to make sure that there's a 0% chance that somebody's going to find out the ingredients to Coca-Cola or whatever, as an example. So that's really fascinating. Let's back up just a second and talk a little bit about the origin story and the concept. Where did it come from?
Sure. Yeah. So it came from a little unknown university called the Ohio State University. That's where it was.
Shout out Buckeyes.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not a Buckeye, but sure. Like, I can't hate. I work for a great company that came from there. So I'm from south of the border, Nashville, Kentucky. So we're Wildcat country down here. But
wow, you guys are rivals then.
Nonetheless, but it's all good for me. I have a lot of friends at Ohio State University, including my boss, who's a wonderful man, by the way. But no, they're good people. So our co-founders, CEO and CTO, our CEO is a PhD from MIT and was a professor at Ohio State University. Our CTO was his grad student, and actually the origins of the technology don't look very much like what it manifests itself today. But the problem that they were trying to solve, which is what's a secure way and non-conventional way to be able to securely transmit data and control authorized access to that data outside of the realms of relying on devices or the places where it's stored, because that's the ultimate problem we have today. There's a lot of secure cloud storage, or even you can put BitLocker on your machines, and that's all good in general, as long as the data stays put. But data moves, that's how you unlock value. And so you keep buying more things to store data, but you can control it maybe inside of your organization. What happens when you send it to me? It's a pinky promise and an NDA or a Scout's honor that my stuff's as good as your stuff, right? When I'm going to do that. Yeah. So they were looking at ways to do that. And they actually started with just using sound waves to this access control. So as long as the laptop could pick up the sound waves that was authorizing it to look at data, the data would stay open. But the minute the sound waves would be off and it couldn't receive that sound waves, it would close the data. And so that's kind of like where things started. So there's actually videos of them being in a super long corridor in Ohio State, a microphone down at one end, a laptop at the other end, and they're playing just audio recording off a little tape deck into the microphone and so on and so forth. It's really cool. But out of that, then they had the great idea of well, this isn't really just to this, but all these different assets are access controls of how could we apply that same thing. So it's in a zero trust model. And there's just a lot of unmet need in that space for ways to actually protect data beyond just conventional things. So that's where it started at.
Wow, that is so interesting. I'll have to go back and look at some of those videos, because when you said sound waves, I was like, now what? I don't. Yeah. So if I'm in a New York City subway, it may or may not work. What is it? What kind of sound waves is it looking for? So now it's just based on rules. So you create the rules, and then that's how it interacts with the data. Is that pretty much true?
Yeah, that's it. But you can even apply so talk about these multi-factor access controls. So taking that same spirit of that, one of the things we can do is you can say only while you're on a specific Wi-Fi SID is this data available. And so we have some, I'll just call them super secret squirrel customers, right? Where only inside you can have these LED lights that are also Wi-Fi emitters for rooms. So think about the old days, you used to have physical data rooms and you had to be in there and you couldn't leave with documents or something like that. This actually allows them to do the same kind of structure. So as long as that light's on in the room, that little Wi-Fi that only works inside of that room from that light is emitting. And so while they're in that room, those documents and everything can be open. But once you shut off that light, that Wi-Fi SID is no longer available. Those documents will close, right? So again, take it on there, and we can support all sorts of kind of crazy things like being in proximity to a Bluetooth sensor, other things. And then we really realized that even though these things are cool, but the principle is allow me to define any kind of crazy context I'd like to define how and when my data should be used. And enterprises come up with a lot of them. And so we built a platform based on those principles. And very soon we'll actually have it opened up to what we call bring your own context, where you can define your own kind of crazy thing, like the light has to be on in the room or this switch has to be flipped. And as long as Anchor will validate it's on, and then as long as that's true, then the rules pass, that type of thing. So we're just extending it to let everybody's creativity govern how they like their data to be accessed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The ability to add that type of customization, I can only imagine how it will open you guys up to additional opportunities as well. Because when you talk about the application, I guess my thought was the recipe for Coca-Cola, but there's a ton of different companies that have really proprietary technology, the different formulas, recipes, or whatever the case may be, or even if it's just certain strategies. I think there's a lot of boardroom and war room talk where I want to have that discussion with a select few people, and there's only so much of that's probably going to leave the room, hopefully. And that's fascinating. Currently, what types of industries do you find are the most receptive to what it is you guys are doing, as far as just based on what they need?
Sure. It's actually a classic problem. I mean, as awesome as that sounds, it's for someone who's in growth and marketing and sales and trying to get a company started off the ground, one of the probably the only incorrect answer I could have besides nobody's interested is it's for everybody, because you have to focus, right? But really, if you look at it across the board, there's very little industry, very little actually individual people that does not have sensitive data that would be ruinous to them if they lost it, right? Maybe if all you do is run like storage lockers or something like that, then it's not the end of the world if somebody got most of your data, right? But it's really across like biotech. Like I have biotech customers, and you talked about those formulas, they call them recipes, right? But these are like genetic therapeutics that they're referring to as recipes, things like that. That's their intellectual property. So we find, and they're underserved because a lot of times they have classic or the line of business, non-classic applications. But I'd say probably right now, 50% of my business is in industrial manufacturing. And it's not because we do something unique for them, but it's because Anchor, our product, is agnostic to and invisible to every application that we interact with. So like I said, once you get out of classical apps like office productivity stuff, then all these other controls and product and protections kind of fall apart. But for industrial manufacturing, they're just underserved. So the same way we can protect the spreadsheet that I was talking about, it's the same way I protect the CAD design, or for the therapeutics, I protect eye surgery videos, right? So I protect every file and application the same way. And so the underserved really love us because not only can we protect their data, which is huge, but it's also, we can protect everything that way. So their administrative burden to have yet another solution goes away because they can have one solution to manage and protect everything. And so, of course, it's a seamless experience for both the end user and the IT side of the house as well.
Got it. Do you have any insight into the R&D that was done while your CEO and CTO were still at Ohio State University? Was it started there, or did they leave there and do some R&D and then start it?
Sure. So there's R&D for years happening in Ohio State University for several years. So we became many years before late 2018, when they kind of spun off. A lot of R&D was done there at Ohio State University. So a lot of the university participated in things like that. We have strong ties to the university. And then we became a private company, and, Ohio University assigned us the patent. So we took that out there. And unlike a lot of other university works where they kind of hold on to the intellectual property, we actually own it and house it here. Once we got out of R&D mode, right, hardcore R&D mode, then it really came into, they spun out to Anchor. I created the private company. Back then we called ourselves Data Anchor, but spun out to a private company, and then just really started focused first couple of years on trying to find product market fit. Yeah.
Got it. What was the product market fit process like?
Hard.
How long did it last? What was the strategy? Yeah, I know. That's why I'm curious, kind of what you guys experienced.
Sure. It was tough. And a myriad of things factored into that. Never a shortage of people that just like you earlier, minds go, whoa, like the technology is, you're like, oh, their minds go crazy, right? And so no shortage of that, people getting excited. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about, focus a lot on security, and I always try and bring it back, is the seamless user experience, because we can geek out on tech. But like for years, so I just joined about a year ago, actually 354 days ago to be exact. So,
oh wow, congrats on the year.
On the 6th will be my year anniversary with the company. But they, for a couple of years, they laid on their strengths, and it was all about tech. So the founder's an academic and everybody else are technical. So talking about widgets and these little things, and look, this Bluetooth proximity, and that's even how they pitched it to me originally. Right. So like all these things are cool and can geek out. I used to be software CTO. And so I used to build things and stuff so I could geek out on that. That doesn't sell software. You know what I mean? Like nobody buys security for security's sake. Security's not sexy. So we just so that was a lot. And we acquired close to maybe 16 customers in the 2 years before I joined. But then when I got in here, it's just focusing. I knew we had to focus on business level messaging and getting that and figuring out what is it that we do? How do we identify? What's our core values and tenets? How do we have those short little splits of pith, right? That get people to say, oh, that's interesting. Wait a minute. And to ask a few level questions, and then ultimately get enough customers quickly to then say, why are the real reasons they're buying this? It's not because it's cool. What's the problems they're really trying to solve? And then focus on getting that to Chris' message, and then continuing to quickly iterate on that to find out what it is, to where we're at like today, which is we have highly good business level messaging where we're taking meetings with C-levels that are pointing us directly to their leaders and saying, so-and-so's got this initiative. I want you to talk to them because I've got to get this sorted. So it took a while. It's really awesome because we have a great tech and great minds behind it. You know what I mean? People that have built, our CEO's licensed many technologies before this one, but this is one when he said, he looked at it and said, oh, this is such an unmet need. This is different, that he wanted to build a company around it because it was so different. And so just changing from features and functions to like business value in the last year is really, we found our footing, I'd say maybe 6 months ago from a PMF perspective.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I'll tell you on a high level, the messaging is really, really good. The site looks fantastic. It's pretty clear to anyone in the business world, really, what it is you guys are doing and what problem you're solving. Like even though my examples might not be like the perfect fit for you guys, it shows you that I'm like, but this is how it could work. This is what it could do. Do you guys also, I'm guessing that maybe you've covered it, but I'm guessing it's everything, but do you guys also protect consumer data? So data around my customers, like their information, their credit card numbers. Do you have like a masking capability around that information?
Sure. So the data we focus on specifically is data that resides in files, because we protect the files themselves. So we do have some customers using us to protect database files and stuff like that. That's not where we focus at. So, things that reside in databases and databases themselves, those are best protected by total data encryption. So TDE and databases. I used to work in this world myself, and using that, whether you use it at record or column level encryption and things like that, storing inside the databases or inside of your applications, those things are usually stored in databases. And so we focus on protecting the file. For example, we'll talk about consumer data. So when I joined Anchor and I had to sign up with Anthem here at Anchor, who's our healthcare provider, I had to upload and give them a lot of documents, copies of birth certificates and things like that. Those files are sitting somewhere. And unfortunately, not knocking on Anthem, but like I'm certain that's probably was sitting in somebody's email box, probably downloaded to their computer, uploaded someplace else. Hopefully they deleted it after they uploaded. You know what I mean? So my PHI, though I know Anthem's taking good care of it, my PHI is still sitting out there at risk. So it's really across all of those sectors. Even so much, one of our most prolific use cases now is protecting source code. So you think about that stuff. So we're making sure that companies don't lose their source code, or their source code doesn't walk out the door with them as well. So it's really about the files for us.
Absolutely. In that beginning time, once the product market fit was done and analyzed, and we're like, hey, look, we're going to market, and this is something, if you're not comfortable talking about it, we don't have to talk about it, but I'm just curious, did you guys take outside investment? Were you bootstrapped? What did that look like in terms of launching?
Sure. Yeah. So we're private equity backed. And having close ties with the Ohio University has a great program there. Of course, they're a great incubator. But like coming out of the gate, like Jobs Ohio and Ohio Innovation Fund were some of our earliest investors. Our biggest investors still are to this day. Very bullish. We're super, super happy being a part of that. Ohio, the Ohio Investment Fund, though, they've invested in the Muta, eFuse, who was just shout outs to our friend at eFuse. They were just voted by Crunchbase the best startup in Ohio to work for injectable. We're in a great portfolio and good company with that. And so they really gave us the initial cash we needed to get started. So that's kind of how we got going.
Got it. That's awesome. I talked to several different types of business leaders, and we talk about raising capital and how much of a pain in the ass it can be just to go pitch, to raise a seed round or to raise a Series A, where you're just like constantly pitching. It sounds like you guys might have had a little bit of a simpler path because of the ties to the university.
Yeah. So probably getting started. Yes. Well, like at the end of the day, our founder, Emre, he's a brilliant guy. He really is. PhD from MIT. His experience past due. It's not like this was his first thing and his first baby. He created several things that were licensed, right? So he has credibility. He's done it before. He's been a serial inventor, made things that could be licensed. He has a good history in commercial too, is doing some stints on and off, just not starting his own company. So that didn't hurt us, right? So he had a history of making good things. And our CTO too, he has a good storied engineering career before he got into grad school. Then combining that, honestly, like where we're at now in the Ohio, like the Silicon Heartland, as we like to call it, the Ohio Valley kind of becoming the new destination place. That helped here. We just had investors too, like different from the coast, because I've been a part of startups where I was part of Blade Logic, which was an epic story that was MIT based right out there from right in the backyard of MIT in Waltham, Mass. And I've been a part of another company called Delphix, which is Silicon Valley based. So I've had like kind of both coastal investors, but the Midwest investors that we've been connected with, the mission's a little bit different. Of course, it's still about making money. They do a good job at that, but it's not scaled at any cost. It's about investing like in the local areas. It's about trying to do things here. So it's a little bit, so that helped us too on our mission, but it's still hard. So, what's interesting for me, what's super hard to me about this fundraising, and we're constantly doing all the time, and thankfully we've had a good track of success, is that everybody has the same reaction that you do, which is super excited about the tech. But I get pounded. And again, I've only been here a year, but even from like day 2, I was getting pounded. Like, how come like this is, everybody doesn't have this? How come we've never heard of it before? So I'm the growth guy. I've only been in the seat 2 days, but yeah, how come you're not moving faster? So it just took a bit to get that messaging going. And again, literally like within the last 30 days, we kicked off several marketing efforts and things like that to finally to have a concise message that I could amplify, and I wasn't just spatting out noise and wasting money and dollars. But I think if I had West Coast or East Coast investors in the beginning, that'd have been a lot harder because it's more about driving metrics and top line and other things at the risk of everything else. And the investors that we've had here so far, I have to say, they've been great. They've been understanding, giving us all the help we need, getting us insight in not only just being funding sources, but wisdom sources and connection sources and decision sources. So it's just been another great experience. That's been super helpful.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point that you make, because I think there's a Goldilocks zone of when it's time to market your message and when it's time to start doing the evangelizing of what it is you're doing and what you're solving. I think a lot of, and I don't know, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. I think a lot of creators, and whether it's software, whether it's hardware, whether it's service, they think because they've built it, like it's like the field of dreams. Like
the field of dreams. I was going to say the field of dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. They think that we've got this great idea. It's just going to start selling itself. And don't get me wrong.
Those guys' favorite words.
Yeah. But the tech could be amazing. But if nobody knows that it exists, then nobody knows that it exists.
No, 100%. I said this so I was like the face and voice of the last company I was at there for a bit too, and chief evangelist in a different capacity, of course. I had a phrase saying, field of dreams makes great movies, but it's terrible for selling software, right? So plenty of projects have been built and nobody came. And so I think it's not only is it, you have to have a great technology, which is of course important. There's been a lot of people who've made a lot of money without an ounce of technology or on terrible technology. So That's not necessarily how I define success. Money is just a component of that. But you do have to not only build a great technology, but you also, if you can't articulate why it matters, then nobody cares. Again, if I couldn't get to, this is really cool tech, but I don't know how to map it to what I do. It's something they'll just say, I'll look at it later. But you have to be able to understand, and you have to understand yourself why it matters so you can map to those top line business problems that people have. The customer I spoke to yesterday, or a client I spoke to yesterday, I'm confident there'll be a customer probably before the month's over, that their CIO or their COO was recently burned by one of his high-ranking compliance executives, left, and he's confident that he took intellectual property, their therapeutics company, confident he took information with him, and they don't have anything to stop it, to track it, or to log it. That's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I do. The day before that, same thing in a manufacturer, a high-ranking executive left with what they call the keys to the kingdom, and it became an HR issue. So HR took the ownership of, there's a huge people risk with our intellectual property. So again, look at the top line executive, COO in one, HR, human resources in the other. In that case, though, they told me that high ranking or that took those keys to the kingdom ended up doing jail time. But that was over 5 years ago. And they've been searching diligently, and they've looked through multiple products to solve this issue because it's important. And so now they're excited because they connected with us like 2 days ago. So again, once we got to mapping to those high level business problems, then then there's money and budget, right? It's all about prioritization of spend. And so that's what's key on this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that I think is probably warranted, or that has value to discuss, is when it comes to go to market, I really appreciate the fact that you guys have the right partners where there wasn't this just dooming pressure on you to get this to market as fast as possible and scale it as quick as possible. Yep. But I also think that creates a window of opportunity for your competition, where I think that's a really sensitive time period where sometimes the first to the finish line, the first off the blocks is the one that wins. And they could even have an inferior technology. They could have an inferior product, but because they've got so much muscle getting them to market, and they start to have some of these conversations before you, then they can capitalize on some of that market share. So I guess that on an overview, I want your opinion. But then secondarily, how did that look like? What did that look like for you guys? Did you have any pressure from competitive businesses? Was anybody on your heels in this, or were you guys really just in a league of your own?
Sure. No, those are great questions. Another great phrase we had at my previous company is, as the first shark in the moat gets the whole thing. Right. So in other words, the first one in the market gets the lion's share of the profits, right? There's no other sharks. Once you're the first shark in the moat, you win. Right. So like there certainly is a bit of that. And so certainly always, and I said this here, every day, every week where we're not actively publicly getting out there and consuming all this market is a day that we're giving leg up to somebody else, right? 100%. So as brilliant as my fellow leaders here are, and they really are, like there's millions of people in this country, 300 plus million to be exact. And some of them are trying to think about how to solve the same problems. And there are some other solutions in there that have tried to look at solving this problem. They're doing it in ways that didn't quite work out. Right. So it's only going to be a matter of time where somebody does something just kind of like this and gets in the market. I feel that pressure, even though my board is probably like, I think not that they don't see that exists, but they probably see that I internalize it enough that I'm trying frantically to get it out there for that they perhaps don't add on extra pressure for me again. So if they're watching, I really appreciate that, guys, a lot. But in the market space, everybody likes to think they're a blue ocean. I mean, they really do. So I'm loath to use hype. But I've answered this numerous times. If we're not a blue ocean, we're an extremely purple one, right? Where if you go to blue ocean theory, red ocean's like everybody's playing there and it's toxic, and blue ocean is where you want to be, open waters, everything's healthy. So we're an extremely purple ocean in that space. I have been some competitive products in there, but so far, like in the wild, so to speak, other than I know their existence, most people don't. I've only encountered competition since I've been here in a year, 5 or 6 times, and we've displaced the competition every time. Right. So 5 or 6 times is not thousands of times. So I'm not saying, hey, we're hands down, whatever. But out of all the deals and interactions we've had, it's only been a handful. And so most places I'm coming into, the only competition I really have is the ghost of data protection past. So DLP. So DLP, and I know even Microsoft's trying to reinvent it. DLP has failed, and like everybody accepts that, but it wasn't for lack of trying. So people spent years, thousands of dollars on solutions, even thousands of more dollars on armies of consultants to try to get it working, only in the end to just dust their hands. And it's like, well, all right, like we're done. And so when I'm coming into customers immediately, like if I'm having the first conversation, they want to link me. It's like, oh, so you're a DLP. And so it's great from a market perspective because that means you put me in a bucket. That means you know where dollars go. You know what I mean? You know who owns that budget, that type of stuff. Yeah. But immediately is the context of where I want to distance myself, saying I'm happy to be in that bucket, but I'm completely different because they're like, I've been there, spent like $1.5 million and got the T-shirt and nothing else to show for it. So showing how we're different, like how we differentiate between that quickly. And so we can attach to the same business problems that they tried to solve, attach to the importance of solving those business problems by saying, hey, look, we've taken all the bad things you had and flipped it over to this is something that's completely different. So again, the good and the bad of that, but it's really again, the ghost of data protection past that I'm overcoming in the market space. And that's where the most of my efforts are spent right now is on educating the market around that.
Got it. How did you know, doing 2 years of R&D, getting your first 16 customers, and then really getting to a place just 6 months ago that the message was refined to the place where you're really actually executing on your GTM strategy? How did you know when was the time? When is it time? What was it inside of you? What indicators did you look for where you're like, now's the time to push the button. Now's the time to do this. For anybody else out there that might be listening, that might be in that R&D place.
Sure. I think one of the key things is, especially if you're transitioning out, is having the messaging that's around it that you can articulate it clear, simple. And everybody likes to think that their champagne tastes the best, their dog food tastes the best, whatever analogy you like to use. But like the key thing was, I think there's 2 key things. One is it's hard to really be able to validate product market fit without a lot of customers. Like you don't really have product market fit if you're only getting advice from people who haven't bought your software. It might be valuable, but until you get feedback and advice from people who have put their money down and they're using your software. I'm not just talking about investors, because investors will take you all day long. I think you should have this. I think you should have that. But are your investors using your software? Because if not, take their advice as constructively healthy as you need to keep investors happy. But unless they're using your software, then they're not in a position to really give you super valuable, super finite feedback. And so in order to be able to sell, you also have to have messaging around that, right? It's just simple. You can't just say, here's my tech, give me $5,000 and give it a run. It's really cool. That might work once or twice. So I would say those processes are super important. And so part of my strategy coming in, though, our software, I did say it's like antivirus before in terms of its invisibility, but it's a lot like antivirus in terms of its a ubiquity. Everybody needs it. Like I use it personally here, and I've had no shortage of people saying, I have this for my personal. Do you sell personal licenses? Which we don't. But to small businesses, all the way up to enterprises. So we're talking right now to two like Fortune 200 companies that want to make Anchor a part of their stack, right? And so we have them all in between. So everybody needs it. But when we were first starting out there, we had 16 customers. My goal was, we had a great product. I knew that were things we still had to flesh out to really be able to say, anybody we come up to, yes, we can do something for you. So my goal was originally like, let's just get super small customers quickly. Let's get a message that resonates. And so being able to get to what the first meeting you ever heard of us and say, give me an order for X amount of units. That was my goal. So like in the first less than 60 days, we got there, right? Going from like basically nothing. That's like what I called one and done. Let me take a meeting about Anchor. Oh my gosh, it sounds amazing. Let me have 10, 20 licenses. And so we did that really quickly. And we really quickly got, like in a matter of just a few months, went from 16 to 30 customers. And most of those were in the small market, SMB market. And I think one of those were in the mid market. But that allowed us to do revenue's great, logos are great, super exciting time. So it certainly changed the dynamic of the team, which is huge. But it also allowed us to get a lot of quick feedback from people who were paying, right? Yeah. And so people that were like either saying, this doesn't work and I want my money back. But we've had zero churn, right? In all the years that we've had customers. And our net retention is high. So they buy and they continue to expand on their own without our intervention. So those are good things. Those are all things for validating you have a good product to market. But getting that feedback from people who are paying and saying, I'd like to see this, and are willing to wait a quarter or 2 or 3 quarters for you to do it because the value you're delivering is so great, and they'll continue to pay and use it, though these features are lacking that could really unlock additional value for them. That's huge. And then the other thing I'll add to that, I know this is a long-winded answer, but is from the messaging perspective of the other thing of go-to-market, right? Product market fit is one thing, but the go-to-market on this is when I got to the point, when did I know on that? Was simply when I was going through my presentation, which I was giving like almost the same thing every single time on it, keeping the message simple, as when people started finishing my sentences and slides and completing the story for me, having never seen it before. So that means, so then I can, and I'm just there excited. You see my big comment. Yep, exactly. Yes, you got it. That's the next slide. And when you're doing that consistently in rooms, even large rooms of people, and they're chiming, so that means I could also, yes. Then that means you're unlocking what you get there. And so does that solve this problem for me? Yes. That's when like you've got it. Now, then the answer came from me is, how do I get from the conversations and meetings are great and that never gets old, seeing people's eyes pop and like the conversation I had with you. Oh, wow. Yeah. But like, from a scale perspective is I want to get all that like into my website. I want to get all that into people's inboxes. I want to get all that into their YouTube or video or social streams that they're learning about it there. When I'm talking to them, it's about their fringe use case, or they're just going directly to order, or they're talking to their major reseller or whatever, saying, look, I really want to look at Anchor to solve this thing because we have this insider threat issue, that type of thing. So that's when I knew it was time to quit like giving that firsthand account and to find ways creatively to get this information into people's feeds, because it's obviously they get it once we get the hook set in. So that was the key thing on the go-to-market that I knew.
Interesting. No, I appreciate that. Why did you opt to earn those customers by a traditional sales approach versus offering a free proof of concept for 6 months in exchange for a use case or in exchange for a reference? I talked to some business leaders that they're go-to-market where they're like, we need use cases. We need to do some product market fit analysis. We need to do some VOCs, voice of the customer, to see how it's working. And so we're going to give our first 6 customers 6 months of usage for free. We'll license it to them in exchange for that information back. Sometimes it helps you get to market quicker. Why didn't you go that route?
A few reasons, but I'd say the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll work it backwards on the last thing you said, is things that are free have no value. And so in exchange for a use case, getting 6 months, and it's going to sit there for forever because they haven't paid for it. They might get to it about 3 months in. They might hem-haw because they're not really invested in it. Nobody's owning it. It's not driving. You're not getting really super feedback because it's not critical. It's not attached necessarily to a business driver per se. I know there's ways to more qualify that. But I think for us, one of the benefits that when I came in here, just having SaaS experience, again, like I'm the first kind of like real business guy that they brought in, has SaaS software experience and been a SaaS software like CTO, part of the CTO office. is like, we're a SaaS solution. Like we need to leverage all the benefits of SaaS, which is low cost, high development, high feedback, or fast feedback cycles, quick delivery, simplicity, that stuff. And so leveraging that and letting that be our instrument to where we could just I had an initial thing, my ASP was $2,000 a year for 10 users, right? So $2,000 a year, even for some of these smaller shops, I'll take a flyer on that.
Yeah.
Right? And we would offer at the beginning of that, hey, look, 14-day free trial at the beginning of the term, right? Just 14 days. Because quite simply, we had a technology that was so simple that even today, none of my pilots have ever went the full 14 days. On my pilots, they've all ended within sometimes as short as 2 hours. Was it, I've seen enough, send me the order form, right? So when we focused on the key 3 values when I came here, it was like, we're going to focus on simplicity, transparency, and affordability across everything, business, product, messaging. And we just did that quickly, like inside of 60 days, just really got things simple. And so that allowed them to quickly get a huge amount of value for just $2,000, but they were paying something. So allow us to quickly be able to iterate, get feedback loops. And again, double our customer base in just a few months and get that of paying customers. And again, too, if I look at it from an investor perspective, a board's perspective, you got 20 logos, you got 16 new logos that are going to be references for you in a couple quarters if all goes well, or do you have 16 paying customers that shows that you're really solving a thing and they'll do it. So it's just a different model. We made sure we leveraged the benefits of SaaS. We continue to drive that there. And it was also a gut check to ourselves to force things to be simple, fast, and efficient and live up to our values. So it's a little bit of champagne drinking ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, it's almost like you took a little bit of a risk there. I think you de-risked it. You de-risked it a little bit on your target, going after smaller accounts, but still it's like at a certain point, you're going to look at that and be like, if you didn't drive those customers, if you weren't successful, you're going to be like, oh, what is the problem? What's the issue here?
The thing, if I'm saying here, why don't you run this for 6 months and I'll let you have it for free. And it's, if you do a use case, it's also a lack of confidence in your software and you're portraying people at the end of the day. I believe in our product. I believe in what we do. I knew it was a risk. And I knew, again, everybody's always a little ahead of your skis. If you're not a little over your skis, if you're not a little out ahead, then you're playing too safe and you're not going to win. The survival in this game of software startups is already very thin, and it's not for the ones that just aren't afraid to risk it. But you have to use smart bets. And so I believed in the tech. I believed in the team here. I had a great team of people here. They just need kind of the right juice and energy in the right direction. And really the challenge of like, all right, we're doing this and this is how we're going to go do it. And it was really a huge morale booster to the team. Not only to step up and say, yes, we're going to deliver on this, but as people started turning over money for our software, even though it's fairly early stage, like it just redoubled. Our team is tireless. They work on this stuff work on it super hard, and they get super excited, everybody here. So it was the right call for us. If you have a more legacy style business, or if you don't have the benefit of SaaS software, I get there's a little bit more in investment. You might have to ship hardware. You might have to do hands-on professional services that requires more of your time. It's far more expensive to do those things. And you might have to do these more longer term structured pieces. But I knew it was, let's get the technology in the hands of the people. It does a lot of things, provides a lot of value for low cost. And so that was our method.
Yeah, no, I love that. And the what it equated to in terms of boosting morale, as well as the market validation, because how can you feel validated if you've got 30 users, but they all got your software for free versus having 30 users that all said, hey, we want to invest, we want to pay. The level of validation and what that does for everyone involved is really powerful as well. So I get that. Mm-hmm. So this has been a really great conversation. What's next? What's on your 12-month plan, 3-year plan? What's next for Anchor?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of pressure to talk these days about everybody wants to kind of move up market. It's always that creme de la creme, like you want Fortune 1 as your logo and stuff like that. But we're really solving, again, everybody has this problem, but we realize too, we're not actively seeking out enterprises right now, because as we're growing as a company, we're doing things smart and moving up market step by step and inch by inch and capturing more and more market as we move up. But at the same time, we're getting pulled up, so to speak, by some of these big organizations. And I won't mention by name, but one recently is a top energy company and said, we've been trying to solve this problem for 20 years. And so we want you in our lab, in the spring. We're happy and excited about those opportunities. So for us, our vision is that we should be able to deliver this secure data experience, the secure file experience. And in order to do so, we need to be able to support all the ways that people work, because we want to be transparent. So that means we need to support any platform, any cloud. So as we extend into all these other native cloud integrations, native platform integrations, things like that, and expanding our use cases, we're just focusing on trying to cover cover the whole gamut. And so it's more of what we're doing. We have a great roadmap that's been validated, and just accelerating those timelines to where we can anybody can use Anchor. It integrates directly in whatever cloud platform you have or what have you. You'll see the option to add Anchor in your app store on your platform. You can, or your operating system or your phone or your device, which we have support those things today. You can install Anchor there and work with your data if you like as well. And it just supports everything and becomes a regular part of your walk of life. So that's our mission, is to be everywhere and support the way that everybody works.
That's incredible. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time. If you've been listening, our time, it's the one thing that we can't get back. So Adam, thank you so much for spending this last hour with me. I have no doubt in what you guys are going to accomplish, but I'm excited to watch it happen. If you have listened, please, they're telling me to ask for likes and subscribe and comment any other topics that you found valuable or anything that Adam said. I think one of the things that stands out to me is if it's free, it has zero value. And so that's going to stick with me. Adam, thanks so much. And thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks.